transformation is where the unknown becomes your competitive edge, and finding what the unknown is step one in the whole alchemistic process. And once you know what the unknown is, like figuring that out and being maniacally focused on that.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where we bring you conversation with leaders who are making an impact in business and our communities. Today, I'm here with David Miller. He's the founder of multiple businesses, including his latest, Alchemy of Scale, which is coaching practice that helps entrepreneurs systematize their operations to unlock their business growth. Thanks for being here today, David.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great we're finally getting to do this. So tell us all about Alchemy of Scale and what you help entrepreneurs do.
I help entrepreneurs balance that method and magic in a business, and ultimately reduce the amount of mistakes that I've experienced. Translate that over to mapping that over to their situation.
So, what are some of those mistakes you've experienced?
I don't think we have enough time today for that, Jason. Oh gosh, what area? And we can dive into wherever you wish.
Well, one of the things I want to get into is it's pretty clear how to systematize operations, finance, some of the really nuts and bolts, number-driven things of the business. How do you help systematize a business with leadership and talent, and developing the people to help your clients?
I think the main recipe for that, because people will do it themselves, especially when you get the right people. So I think the main recipe for that is A players. So then the question becomes, how do you get A players? And what could be an A player for your team could be a C player for another team, and vice versa. So really being crystal clear on those core values that your team has, not just having them pasted on a wall, but hiring, firing, promoting, rewarding, recognizing employees based on those actions and core values is integral to getting those A players on board and retaining those A players. Because if you hire a great A player on your team and you got a group of C players, that A player is going to leave. If the proper leadership changes and adjustments are made. So yeah, I think it all comes down to the people. You get A players on your team, you get them aligned with what the company vision is, crystal clear on that. And then you be really clear about what their job role is and their responsibilities, KPIs, et cetera. Then, they're going to take it and run for you.
Yeah, one of the big challenges, we've all seen it, where we get, or someone we know gets a really great A player on their team, and the rest of the team isn't really ready for what that A player is bringing. So as leaders, what do we need to do to get our teams ready for when we bring this A player on?
Wow. I think whenever someone brings an A player on, it's no one really knows exactly when it's going to happen. Or how it's going to happen, what role it's going to happen in. Hopefully you have, existing A players, and or, some B plus players that rise to a higher level because of that A player. So, just making sure you have the systems and structures and the right expectations, or standards, I should say, not expectations, have the right standards of excellence that are in alignment with what your company is doing. Just make that crystal clear, and then the whole team will swarm around that once they get on board.
That's something that I saw in the Air Force. Sometimes a new commander comes in, or a new director of operation comes in, and they start to raise the bar on standards of excellence. And the team, despite still wearing Air Force uniforms, isn't quite ready for that. What's what's your advice to leaders who maybe realize they need to raise their standards of excellence and that the standard hasn't been there? What's your advice for how someone who's a frontline manager, a mid-level manager, or even someone CEO, founder level can start to make that change? Because that change is really hard for an organization when we had one standard and then we rise to another standard.
Yeah. So your question, make sure I understand, Jason, is what can a leader do within an organization when the standard of excellence isn't there amongst the team?
What can they do? And also, how can they prepare themselves to stick with it? A lot of times we get caught up in the day-to-day as leaders, right? And the path of least resistance is, I know we said this is the new standard, but just for today, let's live up to the old standard. How do we stick with it? How do we get it to take hold? Change management's really hard no matter what change you're making in any size organization, right? How do we prepare ourselves and our team to take on that change and really to stick with it? Because that's where I've seen a lot of organizations fail on that, is they have these grand visions of change and raising the bar and they don't stick with it.
I'll steal a phrase from, it's not coming to mind who said it, but I said this in one of my planning sessions with a leadership team this last week, is the main thing is to keep the main thing, and be kind of going back to core values and clarity, is being crystal clear on what direction your company is going in. If those are quarterly initiatives that you're performing, making sure that those are being executed on, rewinding that back to each job position and responsibility, and making sure their daily KPIs, monthly, weekly, quarterly KPIs are being met, and that everything's rolling up into the organization. And small businesses can sometimes fall victim to the shiny object syndrome, and that's at the usually at the feet of the entrepreneur. So if the entrepreneur is the COO or is involved in the organization, making sure that that creativity isn't lost, but at the same time, you have very clear goals as to what the team is working towards. The second a group of employees aren't clear on what the mission is, then if they're running in the wrong direction, it's hard for their teammates to correct them or help them out and get everybody rowing in the same direction.
Do you find when you work with your clients, you work with all kinds of clients, different size companies? One of the things we find when we work with startup founders here in Las Vegas, sometimes they're not thinking big enough. Sometimes they're not thinking about the big opportunity they can go after. How do you find that? And if you do, how do you help your clients start to think bigger in terms of bigger opportunity?
We work with elite leaders that want to accomplish big things, and think big. So if there is a self-limiting belief that's present and it's in the mind of that leader, it's really understanding with that leader, they're really discussing with that leader and bringing that out so they can see it's just a mental block in their head. And then, having them come to make that realization, not you telling them it's a realization, right? So understanding what is in their head that is inhibiting or not allowing the company to have a bigger vision, or for them to cast a bigger vision. And then once that is overcome and you work one-on-one with the leader to do that, then I think that's probably one of the more material pieces with it.
Do you see any common themes in what's holding these leaders back?
That's where the magic comes in. I talked about method and magic, Jason, is our the biggest obstacle with any person is themselves. So that comes down to what they experience in their upbringing, the dynamics, the different types of traumas they may or may not experience at different levels of traumas. How do they communicate? There's certainly a lot of different patterns, but at the end of the day, if you're working with elite leaders, there's not a cookie cutter recipe to, hey, if 1+1 = 2 or 1+1 = 3, depending on how you're looking at that, to say that this is how to solve the equation, other than diagnosing it on a case by case basis. And maybe I'm not giving you a clear answer there. So to kind of give a clearer answer, if we were to say, hey, these are some of the common themes, I would say communication. That is definitely one of the biggest things out there. And whether it's with their leadership team, whether it's communicating the vision that's in the leader's head, articulating that and explaining that to the team, whether it's the different types of meeting cadences that they're having to make sure that that communication is flowing across the organization in the best way. But yeah, I would say that the main theme that I've identified is communication.
Very cool. So you've had other businesses before, both the financial and the cannabis spaces. What did you see when you were running those businesses that led you to what you're doing today?
What did I see in those businesses? Well, that first business, it took about 15 years to scale. I made about every mistake in the book. I'd never, grown a serious business before. I'd worked in corporate America for 5 years. Always been a hard worker my whole life. And kind of that analogy I use, the best way for me to learn sometimes is just to run through the thorn bush, and experience the pain and see the reasons for the failures happening, as opposed to me just walking around it. I don't know that I approach it that way today, but whenever I was growing that first business, everything from hiring wrong to communicating wrong to having too many initiatives, not delivering a clear message, not even having core values for the first several years. It wasn't until I joined a nonprofit CEO organization where we collaborated, where I got a lot of like those basics in place. I mean, it really took me 5 years to even understand how to run a business. And after 5 years, I was like, okay, I get this. I think I know how to run a business now. um, and the whole leadership is assumed, not granted. I've kind of taken that from day one. I really think that's what got me through the first 5 years, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Other than I wanted to contribute to a greater cause, wanted to do it with good people, and wanted to do business the right way. So that leadership, that the team could see in me, overpowered the lack of experience that I had, and lack of clarity and direction in leading that first business. And that's really why, to answer a little bit more on the second business, that's why it took me 80% less time, about 3 years or so, to scale that second business to 8 figures than it did the first business. Because if you to look at a business like it's a matrix, it's you see all the different moving parts and what needs to happen, even though they're in completely different industries. It's making sure that those proper steps are taken. And yeah, so that's why it was so easy to scale that second business in 80% less time than I did the first.
And that's a fantastic result, and it's all a result of you investing in your own leadership development and becoming a stronger leader, right?
Yeah. I think one of the things that, again, that nonprofit that I mentioned for CEOs, one of their core values is learning and having continual learning and always growing. And if you're a leader and you're not open to growing, then you're dying. And that obviously casts in a lot of different directions for other things. But when it comes to leadership, if you aren't growing and you aren't open to learning, then you are dying. I don't know how a business is going to operate in 5, 7, 10 years when it comes to artificial intelligence. I know it's going to be integral, but what I do know is that, if you're not starting to incorporate that into your business, then you're going to have a tough time. I was talking to an Army Ranger last week who's in the AI space, and the things that they're seeing, from how businesses are going to be able to operate, and they're obviously seeing it in a different lens than us because they're in the space. They think it's coming in 2 or 3 years, and maybe it's not going to crash your current business if you don't change today or tomorrow, but it's definitely going to put you at a disadvantage. So yeah, that whole learning piece and being open to learning as a leader, so you can apply that to your business is integral.
Yeah, every generation has its technology that comes and revolutionizes the workspace. You can look back at the historical examples, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but what we do know is, if you look historically, it comes faster than anyone expected, and the impact is bigger than anyone expected. And sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, but in a lot of ways, it makes the business and the economy in general more positive. So I think we do all need to be looking at AI. That's going to be at least one of the technologies that revolutionizes our business world and our economy right now. Constant learning is so important. How do we instill that as leaders, as CEOs? How do we instill this idea of constant learning with the other leaders on our team?
I think it's taking a look at what are the different ways to learn. What are the different ways for the employees to know that you're providing value, and that not only the company is growing, its overall knowledge and direction in the marketplace, but on an individual level, how do they know that they're growing? How do they know that you care about them? And that comes down to, like, what is their specific job duty? And is there some type of continuing education? Is there some type of designation, within their specific job duty through an HR? Do they have a SHRM designation, or, whatever the appropriate lettering is? If there's a conference, an HR conference, stick with the HR theme, then, do they need to go to that so they can collaborate with other people in HR to see, like, what are they doing, in their companies to make improvements. And then also just doing general leadership type activities, whether it's going bowling with your team after a quarterly initiative is accomplished, and, bowling and brews, or, whatever the catchy phrase is that you want to do. And, I personally loved going to just general leadership conferences, especially with the team, and seeing those well-known leaders, whether it's Brian Tracy in sales, whether it's Zig Ziglar, or even some of the more woo-woo type leaders like Joe Dispenza in the neuroscience and emotional intelligence space, Simon Sinek, Malcolm Gladwell, and all the different leaders that cast these different visions that can improve each individual employee's lives from an angle that's not necessarily, can be, like I referenced in the beginning of this part of the conversation, but it's not necessarily related specifically to their job role, but kind of giving them an all-encompassing view.
One of the things I loved about what you just talked about is that there's a way to measure this, right? Are they picking up those certifications? Are they doing that on a kind of regular basis that makes sense? Are they attending these conferences? Are they coming back and talking about what they learned at these conferences and trying to apply them? And I think that's something that gets lost sometimes. And when we talk about continuous learning, we don't always measure it well. And you found a really good way to measure it.
Well, thank you. I don't have a formula for it yet, but I'd like to think it's swimming around in my head somehow.
I'm sure. I'm sure we'll get it out of you someday. We'll have you back when you figure it out. So, besides continuous learning, which I agree is truly truly important, what are some of the other traits and skills we as C-suite level leaders need to be developing in our emerging leaders to set our company up for success in 5 to 7 years?
Oh, that's a deep question. One of the things that, being in having a financial background and accounting background, um, one of the things that I was able to see front lines, and I was raised in a small town in East Tennessee, and there was one red light in the whole town. So I don't want to say I lived a simple life, but it wasn't a big city life. So I see things. I try and see things in a very simple perspective, and then add on complication as needed thereafter. So going into the financial space, there's obviously a lot of different moving parts. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of numbers involved. Somebody flips on CNBC, you're a lot of people get anxiety and like, what the heck is going on? The world's either crashing or, the stock market's going so well, we're all going to make billions, kind of taking a little extreme juxtaposition there, but I think you're with me. So to answer your question, one of the most misunderstood words for small business owners, at least in my experience, or words, not word, is M&A, or mergers and acquisitions. And that is one of the most important ways for a company to grow. And one of the safest ways, given they understand and take the time, again, back to that continued learning, to understand what M&A actually is. And I was given a speech to a couple hundred or about 150 CEOs 2 months ago, and asked everybody kind of raise their hand. It was like, hey, I don't know, Jason, maybe I've performed a couple dozen total acquisitions, mergers, and spinoffs, or one spinoff, but the rest are M&A. So, I asked the group, I was like, how many of y'all have done a merger or an acquisition? And 6 of the people raised their hands. I was like, okay, well, here's the first thing is about half of the people here in this room are better at M&A than me. And I've done a couple dozen of them. And they just kind of looked at me like, you're full of it, David. I was like, the reason half of you all are most likely better at M&A than me is because you're women. And they're like, okay, now I'm really confused. And I said, the reason I say that is because, one, I've made almost every mistake in the book when it comes to M&A. And 2, I'm really bad at shopping. And that is all M&A is shopping. So I framed it in a way to where it simplified it. Mergers and acquisitions, we think Wall Street, we think, all of these moving dynamics, maybe even private equity or venture capital. And it's really not that complicated. And I asked one of the ladies in the group, who, and I knew her, she knew I was going to ask her the question. And I said, what is, tell me about what's your favorite store? She said Gucci. And I was like, well, what do you do when you go to Gucci, when you want to get something? I was like, and she answered and kind of, went through her process and all that. I was like, that's right. Mariana does not go into Gucci, go to the salesperson or the customer service person and say, hey, give me a Gucci belt, give me a pair of pants, give me a jacket. I'll be sitting in my car and I'll be on my way. No. And the reason she doesn't do that is because she goes in, she wants something that fits her style, i.e. her culture, if we're going to map this over to a company, something that complements what she's already doing. So again, fitting that style. So she doesn't want something exactly like what she already has, but she wants to, improve it, add on to it. And there were various other factors, and that's really all M&A is finding something that aligns with your core purpose, the direction that you're going, and something that helps move your company forward, towards your vision. So I can go into that a little deeper as to how that's done if we need to, because you're buying time, you're buying customers, employees, team intel, OpEx efficiencies, all that. But at the end of the day, I'm giving you a long answer here, Jason. So
it's okay. Keep giving the answer. I'm loving every second of it.
So at the end of the day, it's how do you simplify something that can be seen as super complex or mystifying or even magical in some cases, and just taking it to layman's terms so people can understand.
I've never heard this put into this kind of analogy before, but I think if people thought about it this way when they were going through an M&A, it might not be so complicated. They might not get so wrapped up on the challenges of it, and because a lot of M&As are done poorly, we know that. So, and I think it's because they're not thinking about it the way you're talking about. And the thread I want to pull here, you've talked about there's something magical about this. Your company is Alchemy of Scale. How does this fit into working with CEOs to get them to think alchemistically?
It's transformation is where the unknown becomes your competitive edge, and finding what the unknown is step one in the whole alchemistic process. And once you know what the unknown is, like figuring that out and being maniacally focused on that. So when it comes, if we're relating that to mergers and acquisitions, it's just simply telling them, saying, hey, M&A isn't that complicated. We can find a strategy. If this company has only $1 million in revenue and they've never done an M&A before, or let's take it even less. Let's say they only have 100,000 in revenue. Well, a merger or an acquisition could be something as simple as buying something for $10,000, buying an intangible asset from a business that, as Warren Buffett calls it, is a cigar butt. There's a lot of opportunity for it to still smoke there and get value out of, and even and increase and amplify what you already have. But taking it small. And that I'd recommend to them, they should probably have that first acquisition, as a rule of thumb, should be somewhere between 10 to 30% of their top line revenue, at least for the first one. You don't want to go into a leveraged buyout or something where the company you're buying is larger than yours, because you're going to have a lot of failures on that first acquisition, and it's how can you just discover those failures at an early time and mitigate them thereafter. So. I think it's. Did that answer your question, Jason? Or
yeah, it gives us a real clear example regarding M&As, mergers and acquisitions, of how as CEOs we can think alchemistically, right? Think about the opportunity. Think about how it would benefit us. Maybe it's not an opportunity for everyone, but it's an opportunity for us, right?
Yeah. So the whole alchemy piece, and having leaders seeing that, magic is really having something that other people don't understand. You can completely understand it. And sometimes there can be a negative connotation with that because it's deceiving in a sense, right? If we talk about, someone pulling a rabbit out of a hat or ace up their sleeve, whatever it is they're doing, it's deception. But if you frame it a little bit differently with a positive connotation, it's just, something the other people don't know. And you being able to identify what that magic is in your business. What don't you know? What do your competitors not know? Then how do you figure that out? So again, transformation is where the unknown becomes your competitive edge. then how do you transform that unknown into something that is your competitive edge, i.e. your magic?
And not everyone's going to see it, right? You may see it as the CEO or someone in the C-suite. As a leader, you may see it. Not everyone around you may see it. We find that with startups a lot, tech startups, is that there's a lot of startups ideas out there, and they go pitch investors, and 90% of investors just don't get it. They don't see the opportunity. And then another, 10% of them see it, and then 5% might be out. They don't believe in the opportunity. And then, some small percentage decide to invest. And, we have all kinds of historical examples of big investors who missed out on things like Uber and Airbnb because they just didn't get it, right? And that's something, we need to have a little conviction as a leader, as a CEO. If we see the magic, if we believe in the transformation, if we believe there's opportunity in the unknown, we've got to have that conviction, right?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And you mentioned Airbnb. I don't know if you've actually ever seen the pitch deck that Airbnb had. Yeah, you're shaking your head. Yeah. So the pitch deck that they had, it was, a lot of people said, not up to par, right? So if you take a look at that, and obviously they're way more successful than I am as far as businesses they've built and all that, but if you take a look at that and map it over to what I just said, then it's how could they take that magic, the unknown, what you were saying people couldn't see, and they were able to just be super maniacal with their team on the details, the logical processes, all the stuff that makes sense, and then articulate that in their deck. How much more money would they have raised? How much more market share would they have now and today versus VRBO? And I'm not saying that they're doing poorly, but just being able, like you said, to take that magic, that unknown, and apply it to a business, i.e. communicate it with your people, and understand it yourself is paramount there.
Yeah, I think we all need to believe in our own magic a little bit, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's take a break from the serious questions. Let's play a game. Are you up for a game?
Sure.
All right, the name of this game is Rapid Response. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to your mind. Doesn't need to be a one-word answer. Elaborate as much or as little as you'd like to. But we're just going to get to know you a little bit outside of the kinds of questions the business questions we're already asking, okay?
Okay, well, you may need to redact or delete some of these responses, but, here we go.
All right, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. All right. David Miller, rapid response round. Your time begins now. Podcast recommendation.
DOAC.
Okay. One question we should all ask ourselves about ourselves as a leader.
Where do I fail the most and why?
Oh, great one. I love that. Someone we should all be paying attention to.
Sam Altman.
That's a good one. I think we all. He's someone who definitely believes in magic, right?
I agree. Yep.
What is either your get pumped up song or your walk on music?
The most recent song that I've identified on Spotify and downloaded. So it changes all the time.
Okay.
So right now it's Morgan Wallen, Somebody to Love.
Okay, great. That's a good one. Biggest influence in your life?
My father.
A book everyone should read?
Book everyone should read. The Alchemist. That's a little bit jaded, but hey, I get to answer these, right?
They're your answers, and I'm going to be honest with you. We've had quite a few guests who read that book several times a year, and they tell us that when they answer that question. I think it's a great book. So,
oh, awesome. Paulo Coelho for the listeners. The author.
Best springtime recreational activity?
Lacrosse. Watching my son play lacrosse.
I didn't know Tennessee was a big lacrosse place. I grew up in New England. Lacrosse is big up there, but I didn't know Tennessee was big on lacrosse.
It is catching up. It's growing a lot, but there's still a lot of catching up to do. But yeah, it started building.
That's great. That's great. Outside of like Connecticut and Maryland, I didn't think anybody played lacrosse. So
he's actually going up to Maryland this summer. He's on the national team. So yeah, it's I'm going to see some of that northeastern lacrosse that you're probably familiar with.
Yeah, fantastic. We wish him luck.
Thank you.
Your dream vacation spot?
Somewhere where my family's all around me and happy.
Love it. A future business trend you're excited about?
AI operationalizing things for creatives that it's hard for them to logically explain their thoughts.
Oh, I really like that. Because I think there is a lot of potential for creatives with AI. So I think that's really great. All right, last one. Favorite sports team or player?
Favorite player growing up, want to be like Mike. And favorite sports team, the Tennessee Volunteers.
Outstanding. Well, thanks for playing our game. It's always good to get to know our guests in a way that some of our other questions might not tip us off to. So you were a good sport. Now to get back to it, you will be the first to admit that timing and luck have a big impact on the success of a business. How have timing and luck been helpful to you in your ventures?
In the cannabis space, it was definitely luck. So when I said I scaled a company in 80% less time to over 10 million, a lot of that was timing and a little bit of luck. But what the definition of luck, as we all know, is hard work and opportunity meet at the same time. So when I came in and bought this startup that had a couple $100,000 in revenue, one wholesale client, very few online customers, we were able to scale it to over 30,000 customers and grow the sales team. So we had over 150 wholesale accounts in addition to our D2C revenues because of the hemp market and how it had manifested and unfolded at that specific time. And so yeah, I was right place, right time. Had I started that same strat, well, I could still probably do it today given where we are. But had I started that same strategy 2-3 years prior, it would have taken a lot longer. So yeah, I had a stroke of luck there for sure.
Yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs they hit that timing and luck just right. But in addition to that, there's a lot of things entrepreneurs can do to set themselves up for success besides waiting on timing and luck. So what's your advice on what entrepreneurs should focus on so they don't have to rely on luck?
Well, that's where it was interesting because, there was definitely that element of luck. But what I did when I went into that company, I implemented specific scaling systems, started with creating a very clear vision, casting that out to all the employees. Every single new employee that came on board, I took them to lunch, explained the vision, why we did what we did, what were our core values, et cetera, et cetera. I established an organizational chart. I established specific job scorecards, KPIs per job. We had financial planning meetings on a monthly and quarterly basis, all the basic things that needed to be done. And a lot of people, and I didn't do, with my first company until 5, 6, 7, however long it was in, I did that. And that takes time and for those employees to process and digest. Oh, this is how we're going to do things. This is how the company is going to run. So had I not done that before the market opportunity presented itself, then that scaling wouldn't have happened. It would have taken a lot longer. So, there's a little bit of method and a little bit of magic, luck there.
Yeah, I mean, you've been known in the past to say scaling is a thing, and you definitely got some experience from that cannabis business in how to scale properly. Any other advice for founders who are looking to scale their business?
When you do come across that luck and you do have that high exponential growth, expect to clear the board. Not completely, not with the foundational elements of your company, but what worked today won't work the next day, or what worked today won't work tomorrow. And how do I put that into specific words? We improved our gross margins to the tune of $200,000 on a quarterly basis after we grew so much, and we figured out how do we systematize things better given where we are today. So that's 800. Obviously doesn't flow all to the bottom line of profit. A large portion of it did in this case, but that's $800,000 a year in savings, because we grew, didn't have time to correct things because we were growing so fast, hiring, changing things, trying to change things. And then after we grew, we changed things there.
One of the biggest challenges, this from your experience, I know this from my own experience. One of the biggest challenges for leaders is shifting your thinking from the tactical level to the strategic level, right? We all know the phrase, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And a lot of senior leaders get caught up in that. What can we do as senior leaders to help our frontline managers, our mid-level managers, start preparing themselves to be a more strategic leader, a more strategic thinker in the future?
I think provide value first and then get value in return. And that comes down to, if the employee's strengths are tactical, and typically those aren't high level leaders' strengths, getting in the day-to-day, the operations, although it can be, but show them that you understand and you appreciate the tactics and the skills that they have. You connect with them on their level, and they really see that you care about the work and appreciate the work that they do. And then I think they'll be more open to learning about some of the strategic items they can do, whether that's a mid-level manager, frontline employee, because those guys and girls, they know the answer. They're on the front line, and you connect with them. They know that you understand the tactics and appreciate what they're doing. And then they in turn understand what your strategy is, and they start incorporating that to the best of their ability. Then they're going to come to you and communicate whenever they see what they see, and provide you the answers, so your strategy can be that much more easier to execute. So it's a long and winded question or answer. So sorry about that.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. Show that you appreciate how smart they are, how talented they are at the tactical level, and show them how it fits into the big picture, right? And then they will start coming to you with the answers before you have the question, right?
Exactly. Yep. You worded that a lot better than I did. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic answer. I think we found a clip for the episode here. So you've got a lot going on, a lot of success. What's keeping you up at night? What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now, and how are you tackling it?
Maintaining balance in life. How do you ensure that you're contributing to the different communities that you're in, your business community, family community? You're balancing those relationships. You're not being, balance is kind of a joke when it comes to, like, are you living your life in balance? Everything's all out of balance, and it's how do you continue to put different weights on the different sides of the scale so you can get back in balance. So yeah, just maintaining balance in life is the main thing that I'm focusing on.
What are some things you're doing to maintain that balance?
Being involved with my kids' sports. Like I take stats for my middle one's lacrosse, going to every single basketball game, baseball game with my other two boys as I can, as they don't conflict with each other, making sure I'm, calling my siblings, making sure that, I'm calling my niece and singing happy birthday to her on her birthday, and all my nieces and nephews in the business world, is making sure you're going to the right events, that there are the right people there that are vibrating, i.e., that are communicating on your level, so you can maximize your time there. Yeah, and then just having what I call my Fab Five, who are the five most important business people in your life, business relationships in your life, that you're going to that that you're going to maintain communication and connection with, so you can continue to rise together.
I think that's fantastic. That is, all of those things you talked about are things that really successful people, really driven people often forget about. And I don't think we can be reminded too many times, not just to focus on the family stuff, but also who are those 5 business relationships. I really like that, right? The 5 business relationships that aren't necessarily my partners or my strategic partners or the people I work with directly, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
So what's coming up for you in 2025?
I have my hub established, or in the process thereof, in Barcelona. So I'm here in East Tennessee, and also in Barcelona. So that's going to be a fun new dynamic, and being a global coach, so I can work with elite leaders and provide an even higher impact on a global level. So that's going to be my focus, is balancing my time over there and over here. So that's my new endeavor that's going to happen here in the next month.
That's exciting, and it's definitely going to need some active effort to maintain that balance, I think.
I agree with you.
So, but you're setting a great example for all of us. So, for everyone watching or listening right now, what's the one step we can take today to make sure that we are being alchemistic leaders?
Understand what your self-limiting beliefs are, and how do you begin to release those.
All right, and find those five great business relationships that can help you do that, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that one too. I like that, Jason. Let's roll with that one.
That's the beauty of teamwork, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, David, this has been great having you on the show today. Where can everyone find you so they can thank you for joining us?
davidmiller.buzz on Instagram, or just go to alchemyofscale.com.
Outstanding. Well, thank you again for joining us today. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. If you found this conversation valuable, go ahead and share it with someone who can use it. Leave a comment for us, and don't forget to subscribe. If you're on a podcast platform where you can give us a review, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps build our ratings and get the message out, get the stories out of the great guests we've got like David today. So we've got lots more amazing leaders coming your way. Get out there, do great things today. Onward and upward.